Hello and welcome to another D&D Stories. I'm your host, TheWriter, and this is the show where I sit here and regale you with all the tabletop gaming stories and remember when something cool happened. So today, let's take a departure from the usual Pathfinder or D&D or HARP and head over to the D10 system that is Call of Cthulhu. My very first Call of Cthulhu game. I'm very excited to share it with you because it's just never come up before now. I never played it in high school, never played it in college, and I got into touch with somebody who was well known for his Call of Cthulhu skills in his circles, and I asked him to run a game for myself and a friend of mine. So sit back and enjoy the madness-inducing story. Oh, and also, if you feel like it, my character sheet, which I have here, is also available on the D&D Stories Facebook. So if you feel like looking at it and seeing how bad I got messed up during the game, there you go. And for those that don't know, Call of Cthulhu is based in D10, so you actually want to roll lower than your own stat. Like, say you've got a 25 in astronomy, and somebody asks you for an astronomy check, you want to roll a 24 or lower on 2d10 to succeed. So it's kind of like the opposite of D&D. You want to roll as low as you can. Like I said, I've only played one game of it thus far, so I'm not going to be running it anytime soon, but I'll hopefully be playing more of it in the future. But this is my first experience, and I have a couple of pages of notes. I'm going to see if I can't get through this story and see what you guys think. So, our story takes place at the Miskatonic University in Arkham, Massachusetts. A popular setting for Call of Cthulhu stuff. It's on the coast. There's plenty of room for fish people and deep dwellers, but as per usual with this game, you start out with regular people. You are not heroes. You know, you are not a warrior or a wizard or a soldier with a machine gun. You know, your backstory is that you went to college. You know, that's all. You know, I could be a character in Call of Cthulhu. They're just regular people. But I made a character who was a librarian on loan from such and such big city elsewhere to the Miskatonic University Library because there were books in their Dewey Decimal System, and this is the 1920s, the Dewey Decimal System, like drawers, that were not on the shelves. So they hired her from such and such far away because she's renowned for her organizational skills to come organize the library, throw away the cards that pertain to books that aren't there. Like, who's ever heard of the Necronomicon? We don't have a book called the Necronomicon, and stuff like that. And she would throw away the books that have been stolen or are unaccounted for. Her name was Sarah Powers. And she's, 33, redhead. It's the 1920s, so she's got, like, pillow sleeves and a vest and a skirt that reaches her knees and high heels, all that good stuff. In fact, I think I said she was from New Orleans. Yeah, New Orleans. So she's like a southern girl, way up in Massachusetts, on loan for like a year to organize this massive library for these books that are unaccounted for, so they can be, like, X'd out of the system if they're not there, or chased down if they are there. So it's a massive project that, they got her an apartment, she's got her own car, she's just going to live there in Arkham for a year doing this. And whom should approach Sarah while she's organizing, up in the S's, she's up on a ladder somewhere, Socrates, Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, and then she picks up another book and it's Toothmosis, and that belongs an aisle over. What are you doing here? And proceeds to climb down the ladder. But there is a strange man there asking after Sarah Powers by name, who refers to himself as Cecil Gage. Now, Cecil tells her, that he is from the city health department, and that he is out looking for anybody that might be experiencing hallucinations or like stomach cramps, anything like that due to a gas leak that might be nearby, or a poisoned water supply. And he goes kind of into detail, asking her, have you been experiencing any hallucinations lately, Miss Powers? And I go, no, not really. And he asks, if she been having any health problems. Has she been hearing things or smelling things or seeing things that aren't there lately, because they've been, revamping such and such pipes and such, gas lines and things, just to make sure that she's okay. The college, university, the library is quite old, so you never know if something may have seeped up through the cracks and made you sick. And Sarah goes, no, I'm fine. And she sticks Toothmosis up onto the shelf, and Cecil leaves. Then he goes to meet with one of the college professors, a guy by the name of Todd Wilson. And if I remember right, Professor Wilson, Professor Wilson is like a marine biology teacher, so very specific. But, if your university's on the coast, fish is an interesting thing you can study. And he's in there giving his lecture. And he's almost 40. He's got some salt and pepper in his sideburns. Got a little bit of a mustache going on. He's again, it's the 1920s, so he's wearing a trench coat for comfort because they're that far north. He's got the cool fedora and the little professor glasses. He was a cab driver in New York for 20 years, which. He would have been 19 when he started, but, working towards his professorship, I guess, and had just started here in the past couple of years, again, doing marine biology lectures. And after a while, his class ends, and Cecil Gage is there to speak with him, checking a paper in his pocket and then shoving it back in. Are you Professor Todd Wilson, marine biologist at the university? He goes, yeah, that's me. And Cecil asks him much the same, if he's been experiencing any hallucinations, any stomach cramps from bad water or bad food, or anything like that lately. Maybe seeing or hearing things that could not possibly be there. And no, I'm okay. I'm perfectly healthy. I eat right, and walking around this university, there's no roads that go through the university. All the parking is like around the edges, so the whole place is an island. I get a lot of walking in, going to and from class. And Cecil's like, okay, all right, and leaves him there. Afterwards, a day goes by, and everybody goes home. They come back the next day, and Sarah Powers is stopped by the local police when she's about to go into the library, asking after a Mr. Cecil Gage who died last night. Somebody broke into his car while he was in it and tore him up pretty good. They think with a knife or a machete, something big and bladed. He was torn up. And they ask, did he come and say anything to you? He was seen going into the library, and, there's the librarian. We already talked to him. And then there's you, Miss Powers. You're an unusual tenant here at the university library. Did he want to say anything to you? And she said, and Sarah goes, no, he was part of the city health department. He was asking after, like, leaky gas lines and stomach cramps and things like that. And they go, no, Miss Powers, Cecil is a construction worker. He doesn't work for the Department of Health. And, that sailed right over Sarah's head. She failed the discern lies check or whatever it was. And she had believed him entirely. But the police, no, he's a construction worker. He was telling you lies. But he came to you by name. What did he ask you about? And she again relates, he was asking after, like, hallucinations and stomach cramps and talking about leaky gas lines and poor water upkeep and things like that. And they write all this down. And who should happen by, on his way to class, but Professor Todd Wilson, who stops and kind of listens in, because he's seen Miss Powers in the library. She's an attractive young lady. who, well, I say young. She's not young enough to be a student, but not old enough to be a professor like him. So she's an attractive woman, and of course he looks now and then while she's up on a ladder putting books on the shelves while he's doing his own research. And he kind of listens in. He stops by. He lights a cigarette like he's being standoffish for a bit. And the police stop him because Cecil also went and was seen going to talk to him by name as well. And they ask him, Sarah kind of off in the background, Professor Wilson, Cecil Gage was also seen with you yesterday, right before he got murdered in the dead of night. Why did he come to see you? And he relates much the same story. Have you seen any hallucinations, had any stomach cramps from bad food, seeing things that aren't there, or feeling poorly? And, the police do their spot lies check or whatever it happens to be. I forget. Call of Cthulhu has a lot of weird skill checks like navigate and occult and martial arts. I don't even know. But they can tell he's telling the truth. And they leave. And they go, here's our number. If you think of anything that sounds important, the slightest detail could help lead us to his murderer. And they leave Sarah and Todd there to kind of talk amongst themselves. And they look at each other and you go, Professor Wilson, it's good to see you out and about. And, it's like, Miss Powers. And they stand there. Both of them smoke. This is the 20s, back when smoking was cool and sexy and on every other billboard. But they go, bad business, this Mr. Gage guy. And he goes, he gave me his phone number. And Sarah goes, he gave me his number as well. It's just so strange. Why would somebody who works in construction want to impersonate somebody from the Department of Health? Maybe we should investigate. And Todd goes, well, we are playing Call of Cthulhu. We should investigate. And Sarah goes, shh, don't say that. He goes, all right, I'm sorry. And Sarah goes, well, we have his phone number. We can call the operator and see where he lived. Because this is clearly not a number that leads to the Department of Health or a construction company. So, it's not a 1-800 number or anything. So they go into the library and they pick up the phone. They call the operator and they say, operator, can you give us an address to match this number? And they get one. And it's an apartment building, so they know where he lived. So they copy down the address, and they get into Sarah's car. It's a 1920s thing. And they drive over there to kind of see what was going on. And, of course, you might expect that this guy's apartment was crawling with cops, but we actually got there, and there was no one there. And Todd tries the door, and he pushes it open. And, it's a ratty old apartment. The gas lights are flickering, and, his desk is covered with papers. There's spiders and roaches in the tiny, tiny kitchen, and the bathroom has a little bit of algae growing in it. It's not the best place you would ever live. The floor mattress is gross and gray and spotty, and we look around for a while, and we don't find anything in the bathroom, in the bedroom, anything. We finally check out his desk because we know that's going to be the most interesting thing, and we find quite a bit on his desk. We find a yearbook that is 50 years old with 10 people circled, 10 pictures circled. We also find a list of like 18 or 20 people, some of which are scratched out, some of which aren't, including our own names on this list. So Cecil was going around seeing a very particular set of people, and we also find a map with circles and X's all over it, and we cross-reference it for a while, and Sarah kind of stops and scratches her head and goes, these are all like sites of murders that have taken place. She, rolled really high on her "have I been reading the newspaper" luck. and I think I rolled like a 2 out of 100 or whatever it happens to be, and so just about perfect. And she goes, yes, these are all murders that have taken place, and we cross-reference the lists, and of course, all these people that have been murdered are crossed off of this list of 18 people, and we compare the list of 18 people to the 10 people that are in the yearbook, and the 18 people are descendants of the original 10. Like, we look through the yearbook, we find Professor Wilson's, like, grandfather or father, and we find one of Sarah's, like, uncles once removed or something like that. Somebody who shared her last name, whom she is descended from, even though she's from New Orleans. So I guess her family's scattered about. But they see that, all 10 of these people in the yearbook are dead from old age and other causes. And, 10 or 11 of these people, including Mr. Gage, are all dead. So, should we scratch the name off the list because he's dead? And they go, no, it's a little soon for that. But yeah, Todd Wilson and Sarah Powers are on this list as well. So we are descended from these original 10 people. And we go, what do these 10 people have in common? And we find a newspaper, or sorry, that was later. We kind of gather this stuff up, and we're like, do we know any of these people? And Todd rolls his luck to see if we know any of these people. We know one of them. He's a gardener. And as we're pawing through the yearbook, one of the pictures like turns and talks to us. It says, "Oh, I didn't know that. He should be easier to find now." And of course, we roll sanity because yearbooks aren't supposed to be talking to us. We snap it closed and throw it, and Sarah loses a huge chunk of her sanity and flees the room immediately. And Todd loses a smaller chunk of his sanity, but the bad effect that he got from doing so was to parrot people around him, so he fled as well in terror. And they ran all the way down 6 flights of stairs outside, like, oh, I didn't see that, that wasn't real, that could not have been real. It was like the winking picture from Tim Curry's It, It was just a subtle thing that could not have possibly have been. But we force ourselves to go back into the apartment, and Sarah picks up the yearbook and she puts it into a pillowcase, and they gather up the map and the list and anything else that looks of use on his desk. And after a while, we kind of string together, there's 10 people in this yearbook that are dead, 18 people descended from them, 10 of the 18 are dead. Cecil Gage, Todd Wilson, and Sarah Powers, are also on this list. We're descended from them. So what do these 10 people from 50 years ago have in common? So, they decide they're going to investigate and kind of put this together, because the cops have been in and out of this apartment and they didn't take anything, which says they either were not very good cops or they were looking for something else, because there were signs that people had been there before them. So Professor Wilson hangs a no class today sign on his classroom door, and Sarah takes off for the day, and they drive over to Sarah's apartment, which is a fairly upscale place. I mean, I rolled a 10 or an 8 out of 10 on the yearly income thing, so she's a very well-paid librarian apparently. And they make lunch and they kind of look over all these materials and make all the connections that I just told you about. And they also find a symbol and 3 letters, MWS. And they go, MWS, like Mistotonic Water Service or something like that. And Sarah goes, it's possible, but I don't know what to make of this symbol. And Professor Wilson goes, well, I have a colleague who's into anthropology, and or he is a professor of anthropology. I can go talk to him. Why don't you use the library and find out what MWS stands for as far as like businesses or things like that? Because clearly there's some connection between these original 10 people. If we knew what that was, we would know why the 18 descendants are being picked off one after another. And they go, okay, so Todd takes off. It's like later that afternoon, and finds his colleague, the professor of anthropology, and asks him about this symbol. And the symbol looks like 3 swirls arranged in a triangle with like radiance coming off of it. So it's a very simple symbol. And he copies it onto like notebook paper, obviously, and passes it to this much older professor who's been around the block a few times, knows his Christian lore, his Latin lore, all the different like social structures sort of professor. That's what anthropology is. And asks him, Professor, if one of my students passed this off to me, thought it might be of interest, can you identify this? And the professor goes, oh, well, it's no symbol from any history book, I tell you that much. It's very much modern. Some decades ago it was graffiti on the walls. Some bunch of rapscallions kept marking up walls with this symbol. Couldn't tell you what it means though. For all I know, it's a gang sign or something terrible like that. How kids are these days in their rebellious phase. And again, this is the 1920s, so I guess it wouldn't have even been spray paint. It just would have been regular paint in a paint can. But he goes, all right, thanks. Meanwhile, Sarah is over in the library, and she has like a 75 in a used library, so she needs to roll a 75 or lower to succeed at whatever she's doing. So she uses the crap out of that library, pulling open like business ledgers, old books from like registrations for large businesses. It turns out it was not the Mistatonic water service or water station or anything like that. Like she was sure it was going to be the Mistatonic water service, but it was not. And business logos and things are usually paired with the names, but there was no 3-swirl thing that could be found anywhere. And Todd Wilson comes back after a while, after having seen his colleague, and goes, have you found anything? He brings like sandwiches, so that they can keep going well into the night. And they go, well, my colleague thinks that this was like a gang sign or a club sign from some time ago, and it would fit in the time frame of our little friend over there. And he gestures to the possessed yearbook or the whatever you want to call that when a yearbook moves and talks when it's not supposed to, possessed tome, I guess. They're not going to open it again because, that was enough of a shot to their sanity to see it once. And they go, okay, well, if this was such a big deal some decades ago, it might be in like the campus newspaper. So Sarah goes over and starts pulling like microfilm from like back in the day when you could put up that big projector and get the little microfilms that were a couple of inches wide, but they contained like entire newspaper pages of stuff, and they slide it under there and it blows it up really big so you can see it. And they go back, 50 years, and they start flipping through the campus newspaper to see if there were any articles that hosted, whatever MWS is along with that symbol. And sure enough, they find a 10-person arrest sting that pinned an unofficial university club and arrested all of its members, not only for defacement, which is where that symbol came from, pinned it right on them, but for the content of their club, because they were the Mistatonic Warlocks Society. And the university was not about to condone or allow, a bunch of kids in their Wicca phase trying to do blood magic and cutting themselves and mixing up Lord knows what herbs and smoking it and things like that. They claimed that they were doing real magic in the clock tower on the university campgrounds, or just grounds, I guess. And all 10 of them were arrested and taken away and charged with minor things, but their society was shattered after that because everybody knew who they were and where they met, and their clubhouse was kind of picked over, and that was the end of them. So MWS and the Three Swirls, the Mystotonic Warlock Society. And while Todd and Sarah are looking over this, they're like, this, sounds like a bunch of black magic bullshit to me. Todd's taking the tough guy route because he's from New York, and he's been a cab driver. He's seen all kinds of weird people. A bunch of kids trying to practice magic in such a modern setting in a university somewhere, and it's baloney. Don't even worry about it. And while they're doing their research at Sarah's apartment, they decide they're going to go out and go to this clock tower and kind of see what's what. Because if anything is still there, it's a clock tower. Not a lot of people go in and out of there, taking things or pulling up floorboards or anything like that, looking for stuff. So if there was a cult there, which is basically what they were, the Mystotonic Warlock Society, they were basically college-age cultists. They may have left like a message or a hint or something like that as far as what exactly is going on about, what Cecil Gage was into, why all these people are being murdered one after another. And they go, wow, and, it makes sense. 10 arrests, 10 people circled in the yearbook. So Todd and Sarah are descendants of the members of the Mystotonic Warlock Society. And with the original 10 members dead, with 18 descendants, somebody's picking them off just because they're legacies, I guess. The next generation of people that belong to a society are sometimes referred to as legacies, whether they know about it or not. They are bound by blood, basically. You can guarantee membership if you're related to somebody and a spot opens up. You've got candidacy. And they go, well, and Sarah kind of looks up and go, this is all kind of coming together, but we don't have enough pieces. Somebody is obviously killing off all these people. Cecil was among them, so it wasn't him. He's dead. He probably caught wind of all these people dying and was, asking us if we'd seen anything, though in a somewhat bizarre way, hallucinations, seeing things that aren't there. But he tried to reach out to us before he was killed, so we should continue his work and see exactly what's going on. Todd and Sarah head for the clock tower on the university campus, and by now it's 5 p.m., 6 p.m. The sun's going down, the moon's coming up, and there are fewer people on campus to spot them sneaking in. So there's just like a little chain across the archway that allows them to go in, but it's getting dark. And they go, well, what light sources do we have? We've got a Zippo lighter, and that's about it. So they light the Zippo lighter, and they sneak inside, and they start going up, and they just need like a small light source. They don't want beams of light, like a flashlight, like going out the various windows as they go up. And they make their way up the clock tower on the university campus grounds, and they make it to the very top, and it seems to be, for the most part, just kind of left to rot. Like there's, a table with dust all over it. There's some sofas and some bookshelves and some half-melted candles. Like it all got left behind. But there's also a trail in the dust. Somebody was there before us. and Todd leans down to a floorboard, and they hold the Zippo lighter over it, and it's like somebody buried something under this floorboard. They pull up the floorboard, they find a gramophone with a record and three tomes, and on the tomes it says treatise on spellcraft and sorcery. So these are the cultists' spell books that got left behind. And Todd's like, well, I don't know about that stuff, but attached with them are a pair of bangles, which are like, big wristbands. I guess you would wear on one wrist or the other, not both. So it's meant for two people. And Todd goes and he sets up the gramophone. He sets the record on it. He grinds it for a while and flicks the volume up. And they light a pair of cigarettes so they can listen to this thing. They're both smokers. They just are. And it turns out to be Greaston Powers, who is Sarah's ancestor, the great uncle once removed or whatever. Turns out that in the year 50 years before then, which I guess would have been 1870 or something like that, May 3rd, 1870, the Mystotonic Warlock Society performed a summoning ritual with the 3 spell books that they've got here now. They summoned what they only referred to as an outsider, a creature from an existence beyond the pale, from beyond the stars, to do their bidding. Now, what this bidding was not really clear, but they summoned a creature, a thing, an indescribable horror that when it actually arrived in the center of their summoning circle, because it worked, it was real, it happened, they began to panic, and they broke the circle, and their chanting got all out of alignment, and some of them ran, some of them went mad. Greaston Powers was one of the only ones of the 10 that managed to remain and witness all this, as this creature ran loose out of their control, because I guess they weren't expecting it to actually work. So they grew frightened and ran away. But Greaston reports on the gramophone recording that he performed a blood sealing. He went to a remote location out on some farmhouse somewhere, and he drew the magic circle and he lit the candles and he sealed the creature to this plane of existence and to a specified spot or area. And the seal would last so long as at least one of the members of the Mystotonic Warlock Society was alive. So he took blood from all 10 members and mixed it into this spell and probably drew the circle with blood and sealed the creature away. But 50 years have gone by and all 10 of the members are dead now. So Greaston was dying of cancer when he recorded this gramophone thing. He sounded like garbage on the recording, but the last surviving member apparently recently died, and all that remains are the descendants, the blood relatives of the original 10. So this creature, this outsider, if you will, got loose and started killing off all of their descendants, because the only way to send it back from whence it came is for the descendant of one of those 10 people to go perform the ritual to send it away. Do the ritual backwards or whatever you like, to send it back beyond the stars from whence it came. So if all 18 of those people are dead, it can just run rampant however it damn well pleases. And by the time Todd and Sarah reach the end of the recording, they see a long, scary scratch line appearing on the window glass of the belfry above them. And then the whole window shatters in, and it blows out the Zippo lighter, and Sarah has to grab it out of thin air and shove it back into her pocket. And as they're looking up at it, our DM goes, roll sanity, and of course Sarah fails, and so does Todd, and Sarah takes like a giant chunk, like bigger than normal, of her sanity, goes flying away, and she, on a scale of 1 to 99, she started with 25 sanity, so she is just like shooting down into madness after only one or two things. But she sees the window frame kind of bow outward as some invisible, ethereal thing pushes its way into the belfry to try and stop them. And Sarah goes into a stupor. She falls over in the fetal position and is unable to defend herself. And I was wrong. Professor Wilson actually, I don't think, took any sanity damage, or he would have had some ill effect. But he grabs up the books. He grabs up the record. I think he left the gramophone because it was too big. He grabs up the book and the bangles and the record and shoves them into his trench coat and pulls it extra tight so he doesn't lose anything. And then he grabs Sarah, who is in the fetal position, throws her over his shoulder, so her butt is pressed up against his cheek, and books it. He grabs the Zippo lighter out of her pocket and lights it and starts booking it down the freaking stairs. And they barely make it out before it starts blowing out all the other windows. Whatever it is, they can't see it, but they are going to run for it. And, we have to roll and see if any university staff see a grown man in a trench coat running with a librarian lady on his shoulder, and throw her into the car along with some books and a record. But thankfully by then it was dark enough that we were seen but not recognized. So Todd jumps into the front seat of Sarah's car, and pedal to the metal, and they peel out to get away from this thing. Whatever it is, they didn't see it. It was powerful enough to scratch the window and then, bend the frame outward as though it were rubber, but they managed to run for it. And, Todd thinks to himself, well, we're going to go to my place because I've got a gun. And those of you that know Call of Cthulhu know guns don't do you a lot of good, but, that's, given who this is and the way he lives his life and stuff, he's never seen cosmic beings or anything like that. A gun is the only real defense that a man like that would think about. So they book it over to his apartment, which is in a different building in a different part of the city. But Sarah kind of comes back to herself after a while. She's damaged by now. She's not quite permanently damaged, but she's getting there fast. She didn't have a whole ton of sanity points to begin with, and she's taken these huge swaths. I think the yearbook took 5 points away, and then the almost sighting of the monster took 6 points away. So if you get below half of your sanity points playing Call of Cthulhu, you get a permanent insanity. It could be, the fear of heights, the fear of fire, the blood turns you on, or something will be wrong with you forever if you drop below half. So Sarah comes back to herself, and she's just kind of leaning with her cheek on the window in the passenger side, and you okay over there? It's no. Not really. What was that? I don't know. I guess that's the outsider that your great uncle, what's his name, Greaston, was talking about. If there's only X number of descendants left from the Mystotonic Warlock Society, it's probably running around killing them all. So if there's no blood relatives left, there's no sending it away, and it can just run free. And they've kind of pieced this puzzle together by now. They go, why don't we stop at my place? I've got a nice 5-chamber revolver, and we'll figure out what we're going to do from there. So they go to Todd's apartment. They've got the 3 books they need to check out, and wasn't looking at books nice the first time, but they go into his apartment and they shut the door and they pull the chain, and the deadbolt and all that good stuff. And he finds some food, and this is during the Prohibition. Otherwise, they would have pulled a stiff drink as well. But 1920s, and while Todd is going to like the lockbox that has his gun and bullets in it, Sarah's fanned out the books to see exactly what they are, and they don't have hours and hours and hours to read them, because now that the monster has their scent, they really can't sit still for very long. It's not a good idea. So Todd pulls out this not 6-shooter, it's a 5-shooter. I forget what it was called, but it has space for 5 bullets, and he only has 5 bullets. So Sarah's there checking out the three spell books, and I made notes on those. Where are they? The first book was about the bangles, the wristbands that they found. That apparently, if you wear them, the outsider that they summoned can't touch you, and so they immediately put those on, and they go, well, that's fine. It can't touch us, but that doesn't mean it can't like drop a car on our heads, or bust our windows out when we're going 50 miles an hour on the highway, filling our eyes full of glass and sending us into a ditch. It's some help, but it's not safety. So it can't touch us directly. And poor Cecil didn't have any kind of defense like that. But, it can't grab us in its, tentacle hentai embrace and rip us in half, whatever it happens to be. We haven't seen it yet. And God help us if we actually do, because it might snap our minds like Twix bars. But, or Kit Kat bars, excuse me. And we look at the second book, and it's all about the summoning location, the chant that needs to be done, etc., how to affect weather and harvest stuff and sickness and infliction upon your enemies. And the third one is all about how to summon outsiders and how to send them back, and what Latin phrase needs to be said backwards for X amount of time at X location with this circle, etc., etc. It's a whole book about how to summon and how to banish outsiders. And they go, okay. And by now, they're both feeling pretty frayed, because this is turning really real really quickly. So Sarah goes into the bathroom to like splash water on her face and not freak out. She is a woman of letters, and she will not be tread upon by some invisible beastie from beyond the stars that's freaking killing people. She's on her way out. So she's gonna just do her best to hold it together. She goes in there, she uses the bathroom, she's running water and splashing water on her face, leaning down, and her reflection does not lean down to splash water on her face. And she stops and she steps back just in time for her reflection to reach out through the mirror to try and grab her. And of course, she gives the nice, 1950s horror movie scream, which makes Todd whirl around with his gun, but the door is closed, and Sarah dodges past the reflection creature, whose mouth is growing wider than its jaws, and whose eyes are growing huge and bloodshot. Red hair spilling out like seaweed, and she dodges around it just in time, pulls the door, and like flings herself out of this tiny bathroom and like almost straight into Todd, and Todd like points with his 5-shot revolver and blasts this mirror monster into 1 billion pieces, and it shatters all over the floor, turning into mirrored shards once again. And of course, that was a big shot to Sarah's sanity once more. So from then on, she dropped below 13 or 12 or whatever it was, half of 25. I forget if you round up or down, but she gained a permanent paranoia in front of mirrors. So forever from now on, she will always be paranoid when she's in front of mirrors. That is her her new mental illness that she will always have no matter what. And Todd, of course, takes only a little bit of sanity damage because you're probably a little more secure when you've got a gun in your hands and whatever it is blows up when you shoot it. I swear, the guy playing Todd rolled so well when it came to sanity loss every single time. Todd actually started with 40 sanity, and that was probably just a better character build than mine because I'm the noob and I only had 25. But he had 40 sanity, and he could kind of weather the storm a little bit better than Sarah did. But Sarah came away damaged, and he was starting to like feel the gray in his sideburns a little more, and the sweat and hormones that come from shooting something and having it blast into 1,000 pieces. And they look at each other and they look at this bangle, and Sarah's like just shaking, like her sanity's half gone. She's well on her way to Crazy Town. And they gather up the books and they gather up their stuff. It is like, and Todd goes, I fired a gun in an apartment building. We should probably skip town as fast as we can and see if we can put it into this. And Sarah like grabs up the books. They grab up the possessed yearbook and all the paraphernalia they've gathered up so far. Todd doesn't have any more bullets, so they only have 4 bullets left. And when they take off, they take Sarah's car once more. Sarah's exhausted. She's sweaty. She's eyeing the rear view mirror of the car. She takes her compact out of her purse because it has a mirror on it and throws it out because it's a mirror and she can't be having that. And so while they're driving, Sarah has to pore through the spell books, which if you're playing Call of Cthulhu, reading books at all is a bad idea. But she's a librarian, so maybe she was a little more defensive against that. But it wasn't a trio of books that would drive you insane. It was just a trio of instruction books that happened to work with magic. Now, Sarah ascertains after a while, reading like the notes in the sidebars and stuff like that, there was a farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere where this outsider was sealed for X number of years until the original 10 died. And that if they were going to send it back out beyond the stars, they would have to go to the original spot where it was sealed in the first place and send it from there. They summoned it in the bell tower, but the sending location is out on this freaking abandoned farm somewhere. And they get the address and they pull out like a road map and that's where that is. And they take off into the night, and we're pushing like 8 or 9 o'clock by then. And she's got just like her tiny little Zippo lighter, and she's reading by firelight while Todd drives. And they find out that, this sending ritual takes 2 hours to do. It has to start at midnight. It has to be at this location. And, it has to be a spell circle that looks like this, and on and on and on. So it's going to take some doing. And while they're driving, a great big truck comes up behind Sarah's car, like not a Mack truck because we're in the 20s, but like a great big cargo truck, I guess you would say. It's what I was imagining anyway. And it starts following them, and it starts getting closer and closer and closer. And Todd looks in the rearview mirror. He's like, "Can I see the driver?" And he goes, "Yeah, he's driving the truck, but he's slumped over to one side like he's dead." And we go, "Oh, God, no." And he rams the back of Sarah's car. And we go, he's in a giant-ass truck. Not only can he keep up, he can probably force us off the road. And we get, just bashed, 2 or 3 times. And finally, Sarah, sticks a hand into Todd's trench coat and pulls out the revolver. Sarah doesn't have any points in shooting a gun like he does. But he's driving, so they don't have a lot of choice. And Sarah gets up and kind of leans out the window like she's going to shoot out the tires. And she fires once, fires twice, misses both times. She's like, "Shit." And I think the chance to shoot a gun and hit something with no skill is like 20%. So the odds were against her anyway. And she leans back into the window like, I missed. I didn't shoot out the tires. And the truck like revs up and goes around them like it's going to go side by side with them and run them off the road. And Sarah looks over and, she can see the dead guy driving. Like his arms are still moving and like using the gear shift. And his legs are moving, but his head is like slumped to one side. His tongue's hanging out and drooling. He's like a finger puppet right now. He is not home anymore. And Sarah looks over like, well, he's much closer now, and he's right next to us, like he's within 10 feet. And I go, DM, can I ask for like a proximity bonus or something like that? And the DM goes, yeah, why not 20%? So Sarah needs to roll a 40 or less to hit this guy with a bullet because they're right next to each other, about to be run off the road. So Todd's trying to drive while Sarah's trying to like shoot a bullet across his nose at the guy in the vehicle next to them. Roll it. Sarah fires the gun once more, blasts this guy's skull right off the back of his head, and the truck veers off to one side and crashes into the ditches. And they're like, yes! They're like, yes, we did it. That was awesome. And then we, as players, we very suddenly realize we are approaching the final stages of this adventure, and we have a revolver between two players with one bullet in it. So the implication hangs heavy between us as Sarah is unraveling, and Todd can't take much more of this. They have a gun with one bullet. So she, oh so gently, sticks it back into his trench coat. And they drive on out onto this farm, just kind of silent between themselves. Well, Sarah slowly goes back to the books and starts learning a bit more about the ritual so they can set it up when they get there. By the time they reach this farm, it's out in the middle of nowhere. It's abandoned. It's overgrown. Every farm implement near it is rusted out. The house is like a depressed, deflated old woman. It's just like hanging there in shambles, just ready to fall down the next big rainstorm they've got. It's moss and vines and crap growing all over it. I think one of the doors was like off the hinges, just sitting to one side. And they park, and of course the back of the car and the side of the car has been bashed so many times that by the time we stop, one of the wheels comes off, the engine starts smoking, the car is dead. We're not going anywhere after this unless it's on foot. And we go, we don't exactly have paint cans. How are we going to do the magic circle? And Todd goes, why don't you use the road flares that are in the back of the car, because Sarah actually had like a small inventory of stuff that was in her car, like a car jack, road flares, rope, in case she should ever crash. But I forget what's actually in road flares. We said gunpowder, but I don't think that's right. It's like magnesium or phosphorus or something that burns brightly for a very long time. If it was gunpowder, it would probably just blow up. It wasn't dynamite. It was road flares. So the powder inside the road flares, we decided we were going to make the circle with because it would burn into the floor and be permanent. So it couldn't just be like scuffed with somebody's boot and be screwed up and then the monster kills everybody. No. So we arrive in this farm with the books and the road flares, and of course Todd goes in, he's checking all the corners. We've got one bullet left, so you better fucking make it count if there's anything bad in this house. And there's some rustling downstairs, and we're like, oh, God. Todd runs and bars the basement door, and he bars the front door. He leaves the back door unbarred in case we have to make an escape, but there is something in the basement. And he's like, Sarah, go on. I'll keep watch. You set this thing up. Like, they're already past doubt. Belief has gone out the window. They're in this whether they like it or not, after mirror monsters and freaking exploding windows and God knows what else. So the belief train has left the station. Sarah throws the ratty carpets. There's candles everywhere that just got left. There's evidence of the last ritual that took place here. So she's like busting the road flares open and like pouring the powder out in the magic circle. She's looking at the book, drawing the symbols with phosphorus or magnesium or whatever it happens to be. And then she grabs the Zippo lighter and she lights it, and it goes and it burns the magic circle into the floorboards, so it can't be broken or like scuffed like paint or anything. So it's gonna work, hopefully, if she drew it right. And she starts lighting candles to light the place up, and whatever was in the basement runs out through the cellar doors, shouting and swearing. Turns out it was a homeless guy squatting in the basement of this place, and of course, Todd's got his gun. He can just kind of warn the guy off. And like, okay, he can just kind of stand and like hold the back door, or put like a piece of plywood or whatever's laying around to keep this guy out. And they warn him away with the gun and get lost, you freaking squatter. And he's like, oh, this is my house. And of course, he's got like a sleeping bag and a backpack on, and he's wide-eyed and crazy bearded and all that stuff, so he's just a squatter. They get rid of him pretty easily. And we still have the one bullet left. So Sarah sets up like all the candles. She's like undoing her vest and throwing it off because all the candles in such a small space are making her sweat. And she sits on her legs, and she's got like the spell book in one hand, and she squats for a second. Actually, before they even went in, she squats down and she kind of hikes her skirts, and she pulls like a thigh knife or like a small dagger or something. It's like a 3-inch blade, because like girl's got to protect herself, and that thing of mace in her purse can only do so much. So she's got a knife on her, which was pretty cool. But she's got the spell book in one hand and the knife in the other hand. And she's got the proper Latin phrase that she needs to say backwards over and over for 2 hours. And as a guy who sits in front of a camera for like an hour at a time once a week, nonstop talking really hurts your throat after a while. Now, the rituals can stay active as long as at least one person is doing it, which is why you want like a cult of 10 people to summon or banish something, because if somebody gets tired, so long as there's at least one person doing it, it's okay. But Sarah's there to do the chant on her own because Todd has to watch her back in case the whatever it is decides to show up again. Now, will a gun do any good? Probably not, but they don't know that. So Todd has to play tower defense with homeless people and squatters and whatever the hell that creature is that's killing people off. So he's standing there like gun pointed at the ground. He's thrown off his trench coat and his hat by then. And Sarah's sitting there like chanting the Latin incantation backwards while the candles burn brighter and the house kind of shifts back and forth with the shallow winds that blow through the place. And the ceiling starts to melt just a little bit, and like drips of acid start coming down. Like, this thing is already here, and it's not happy that it's being sent back. So Sarah takes some acidic damage, and she kind of has like hunch over the book, so she's still got it to do her chants for this ritual. And Todd picks up his trench coat and kind of like drapes it over her like you would if you were escorting somebody through a rainstorm, and he runs upstairs to see if he can find the source. And he finds he's got like a diving flashlight that he picked up while they were at the apartment, because he's a marine biologist professor. He's got a diving flashlight, and he shines it up and around, and he finds a man-shaped shadow that has no man attached to it. But as soon as he shines the light directly on it, it flees from the light, and the acid stops. and whatever minor bullshit that was, that was putting acid through us. He got rid of it, thankfully, without spending his bullet, because that probably wouldn't have done any good, because it's a shadow. But a light was enough to get rid of it. So he runs back downstairs, and of course we're halfway, 3/4 of the way through the ritual, doing the same chant over and over backwards in Latin. And we hear the voice of the squatter outside crying for help. And of course, no, it's not. And then we hear the same voice that the yearbook used to freak us out at the very beginning. No, we're not going out there. We've got to finish this ritual. Sarah, keep going. There's only a few hours, or there's only a few minutes left. And the creature, the outsider, is eventually kind of coalesced, almost like a rain cloud, into the circle itself, like right in front of them. It has to take on a physical form because of the ritual, because of the chant. It is drawn to this location so it can be sent away. And it takes the form of a fiery, red-haired, like, really beautiful woman who stands nude in this circle, beckoning for Todd, beckoning for Sarah to come join it with a fiery, lustful expression. Now, Sarah is not so much affected by this, but Todd is. So he starts wandering forward as though in a trance to join this creature in the guise of a woman inside this magic circle. And of course, Sarah is between him and the edge of the circle, holding a book in one hand and a knife in the other hand. So while he's about to walk by, she basically swings her arm about and jabs him hard in the leg. And I roll the damage. A knife is like a D4 in Call of Cthulhu. It's nothing compared to most things. But when you've only got like 8 or 10 HP, 3 damage is a lot. So he goes down hard, bleeding from the leg, and is pulled out of the trance. And, all the while Sarah has to keep reciting Latin, so she kind of had to, like blind feint and jab him in the leg while still reciting Latin backwards. When we finally reveal this creature's true form in a way that we can at least partially physically perceive it, it's just a mass. It's a mass of eyes and gnashing teeth and mouths and drool that has a single long tentacle sticking out to one side of it, barbed with a long claw. So that's what stabbed up Cecil, and that's what shattered the windows. It's like a big scorpion stinger almost on the end of a tentacle, and it roars and it gnashes and its eyes blink and look in all directions. We take a pretty good shot of sanity damage just looking at this thing, because you're not supposed to look directly at anything in Call of Cthulhu, but it's right in front of Sarah, and Todd is like knelt down on one knee, and they both get a good eyeful, so they take some serious sanity damage just looking at it. So finally, the 2 hours come to a close, and reality itself rips itself open behind this outsider, this beast, and it is thrown out into the void as our two investigators get a nice eyeful of the deeper dark of the cosmos, the swirling quasars, the endless black dark that no human should ever lay eyes on before it slowly just kind of suctions itself closed, and all the candles in the room are blown out by the displacement of air, and they are left in silence. And it's like, do we do it? Is that it? Yeah? We did it! Yeah! And so they both jump up, Todd less enthusiastically. They both jump up and they hug each other, and they're, yes, we got rid of it. And she throws the book to one side, and she throws the knife to the other side. They're like, we did it, yes! And the weight of, the past 24 hours kind of weighs on them, because they went from everyday people to fighting cosmic horrors in a very short amount of time. They almost got into a car wreck. They almost got, cut up by giant invisible monsters. God, so much happened to them all in one day. And like I said, Sarah is mostly gone at this point. The train to Crazy Town is picking up steam, and Todd is much worse the wear, and they kind of emerge out onto this plain of grass between the farmhouse and the barn. Just like Sarah's left her vest behind, they're covered with sweat. Without even looking at each other, they're pulling their shirts off. They've got blood and grime and freaking hormones, and they've got drips of acid that have settled on their shoulders that are gonna leave scars. They have seen some just nightmarish garbage today, and there's nobody to witness. The homeless guy is probably dead and gone, but there's nobody to witness. They're out in the middle of nowhere, who would ever know what they have done or what they have seen. And they look at each other after a while, and they try to make for the barn, but don't quite make it, because they're just going to have sex out on the grass. Like, their sanity is so far frayed that they need that human comfort. Like, this is not lovemaking. This is not, there's not even much affection here. They need the shot of endorphins that their brains would produce if they somehow achieved orgasm after all that. So they're tearing each other's clothes off, just this animalistic way. And after the day they've had, there's no, they don't even want to think about it. While Todd is penetrating her, he doesn't want to think about the fact that he fired a gun in a crowded apartment building, and his apartment is probably full of cops right now. And while she's locking her ankles behind his waist and shrieking in ecstasy, she doesn't want to think about the fact that her car is toast and they are out in the middle of nowhere. They're going to be walking back, maybe. They don't, 20, 30, 40 miles to the nearest gas station. They were driving forever. And, a spare tire's not going to help when your engine is crunched and smoking. And while he's, spilling his seed inside her and holding her with a fistful of hair down into the dirt, they don't want to think about the fact that they just banished a fucking cosmic horror that killed 11 people that their ancestors brought from God knows where. It's just that gross, animalistic pig sex that, the orgasm is the only thing you're chasing. And by the time they get done and they're just exhausted and laying next to each other, they are spent. They're laying there staring at the sky, at the endless dark, where the moon doesn't even seem friendly. They know what lays beyond the stars and that horrible abysmal darkness. And they try and they go at it again, just for that moment, that little bit of human comfort you can get from attaching yourself to another human being so you don't quite feel as alone in the endless dark. So, after that, they basically have to walk back. That's kind of where our story ends. They have to walk to the nearest bit of civilization because the car is toast. There's nobody going by on this old abandoned farm road. They try to trek back towards civilization. Again, the one gun with the one bullet between them, and they are, half dressed and half crazy. So here's hoping that they make it back alive. So that is the end of that story. That was my very first Call of Cthulhu game. It had its ups and it had its downs, but holy crap, it was pretty intense. I really enjoyed it. So hopefully I'll get to play more Call of Cthulhu in the future and it'll be just as good. But yeah, so I guess that's all I have to say for today, and I hope you guys will join me for the next episode of D&D Stories. Keep gaming. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I really love telling D&D stories, and I also really love eating food. So if you'd like to toss a couple of gold pieces into this humble bard's hat, be sure to check out my Patreon. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit the like button as well. And if you'd like access to maps, character art, and channel updates too, check out the D&D Stories Facebook. Keep gaming!